Hello. The problem of today by Lacny is a very well-known problem, very important one that was many times reproduced, that was in a certain way a complete revolution in its time. Until now it remains a very important problem to know. I hope I'll be able to show it clearly and to make you enjoy this wonderful problem and to understand it as well as possible. This diagram is made in two. The white pieces are down, the black pawns go down, and we begin immediately. So people who want to solve are invited to do it immediately because I'm going on. The knight is controlling d2 and also the queen. On e2 you have only the knight f4 that is controlling. On f2 and f4 you have the bishop that is controlling these two squares and only the bishop. On e4 and f3 you have only the queen. The two squares d4 and d2 are controlled by the queen and also by the knight f3. We have three pieces that are out of use in the diagram because black pieces are forbidding these white pieces to control the squares around the black king. If the pawn on c4 was moving, the rook would be able to control d4 and also e4. The rook on b2, if the pawn on c2 was moving, was able to control d2 and e2. And the bishop h5 would be able to control f3, and if the key is made by the knight, would be also able to control e2. Let's have a look at what happens. If the knight g4 plays, for example h2, the bishop controls f3, and then the queen can give mate on d4 because the knight controls and because the bishop has been opened to f3. If the pawn c4 plays, opens the rook, you have now mate by the queen on e4. The d2 square is controlled, so the queen can abandon it. And if the pawn c2 plays, let's say for a queen, the rook is open to e2. It is a new control that can be used by the knight f4 to give mate now on g2. We have three mates. I show them once again. On knight h2 you have queen d4. On c3 you have queen e4, and on c1 you have knight g2. If someone wants to solve now, I'm now giving the key. Knight d2 threatens a mate by knight f1. You can check it's a mate, all the squares are controlled, and the only solution for black is to control also this square in order to parry the threat. The effects of this move, knight from f3 to d2, are very rich. You have a pre-opening of the line of the bishop h5. You have a pre-closing of the line of the rook b2. You have a change of control. The knight controlled d4 and now controls e4, and also controlled before d2 and now controls f3. The threat is on f1. First defense, knight h2 opens the bishop to e2, and then white can mate by knight g2. If black plays c3, it is a defense because of the opening of the bishop, the black bishop a6. It opens the rook b4, especially to d4 and not to e4, because e4 is already controlled by the knight after the key. And so we can have made by queen d4. The knight took the control on f3 by the key, and if the pawn queens on c1, the rook b2 is open now to d2 and not to e2 as it was before the key, and we can mate by e4 because of the control of e4 by the knight after the key. So what happened? It happened that you have completely 3 new mates after the 3 black defenses. This is a point. But the 3 new mates are also the same that were before the key. The same mates appear, but not after the same black moves. So you have a cyclic shift, and it has never been shown before. So let's have a look now at the changes we have. Before the key, on knight h2, you have queen d4. And on the same move after the key, on knight h2, you have knight to g2. Before the key, on pawn queen, you have knight to g2. And after the key, if pawn queens, you have queen e4. Before the key, on c3, you have queen on e4. And after the key, on c3, you have queen to d4. So if you write the moves, let's say the black moves, small a, small b, small c, and the mates big A, big B, big C, before the key you have on A, B, C, you have big A, big B, big C, and after the key on A, B, C, you have big B, big C, big A. So it is a cyclic shift, and it was this problem the very first one that showed this element, and it was a kind of revolution, and it changed completely the way the chess composition was managed. And afterwards many problems, not so many, but many problems were involved in cyclic shifts, and not only in 2 moves, also in 3 moves, also in fairy compositions, in many fields. And it opened a door that was completely closed before. And then this is really a historical problem. Now I just want also to underline some nice correspondences we have between the lines. You have diagonal lines, for example the bishop that goes to control f3 and also e2, and the diagonal lines of the queen that controls before the key e4 and f3, and also the 2 squares that are controlled by the knight after the key on e4 and on f3. And corresponding to this geometry, you have the rook on b2 that controls before the key e2 and after the key d2 only. It goes in correspondence with the bishop. And also the queen after the key controls d4 and also d2. So you have the 2 lines, perpendicular lines of the rook and of the queen. So you have orthogonal lines, and in a corresponding way the diagonal lines that are also going perpendicular, and it's a very nice and very striking feature of this problem. So I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time. Bye.